recently, animation-wise, I've been largely messing with things based on grids or more rigid forms, and what that looks like when applied to this. What was the most recent animation I did? I've gotten to the point where I'm okay. Yeah, the most recent things we're messing with the paper as a surface to be intersected, which I might take this as an opportunity to try it out with. The most recent thing that I did was I had I had a figure going across and having it cut into sections, sort of. But before that, I had a circular face that I treated the paper as a surface to be intersected and pushed through that way and made it more like a Ripley sort of deal. What I might do is try having either a figure at this sort of angle and have the paper sort of acting like a thing that's moving along this sort of plane. I could also mess with the idea of this angular sort of guy intersecting across that sort of bit, but I think as far as my... Hello Eve, how you doing? How was your weekend? Hope it was nice. This will take more time and effort, even though it's just working on a pre-existing thing. I like the idea of trying to have something that has potentially a greater sense of depth to it. Not sure. Not really the only hint of that sort of bit. Trying to figure out the best sort of approach if it is to be something that's a cube or something like that. Because if it's from the front, a cube doesn't have a lot of variance on the surface. It's a pretty flat thing, whereas if you have a curve like the circle one that I did, there's a lot of different variance in the height. This one, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. I was trying to think of what I've done most recently and then expand or mess with it. And what I've been messing with more recently is treating the paper itself as something of a barrier or like a surface that's being passed through, and trying to think how to mess with that. Where the last one, the implied shape was a sphere. But it was going through the paper conceivably like sort of this, going up and down, and a sphere has, if it's you're viewing from up above, make this an eye, I guess. You see it as just a flat circle from the top, but you can think of the various levels where it changes. If you were to have water or something moving upwards, then it starts to move towards the middle. But if you have a cube, you don't have that same perception. So how to have a cube, because if you're looking at a cube from straight above, it's just a flat surface. So it's either all or nothing for what's being intersected with, like a water line or something. So I was trying to think of if I were doing something angled like such, then you could play with it a little bit more for like that perceived line, where it would be solid here and then mildly transparent on the other bit. But I'm not sure the interest or the sense of form, whether or not it would be present. I went to school for art, studied graphic design, and I've been freelancing since then. This work is keeping me active in things, and accountable, and potentially additional streams and means of promotion. But the work stuff that I do is typically morning or evening. And this is sort of somewhere in between. It's not work, but it's not always profitable. I think if I am doing this, then it might have to be sort of two bouts, where I'm always thinking about the paper being this flat surface in this direction, but it could also be that it's implying a water line in another direction. So if I do have just this sort of base form, I could have stuff go in this direction as an intersection and then rise up in this direction or come back down, where sort of in two bouts. This way and then that way. I think I might mess with that, because so far I've only been trying to imagine like reaching through the paper as a surface, but can treat it otherwise. I'm going to make this isometric. Easiest way. Isometric means that the perspective of it is mathematical. It's fake. It's doing it in a perfect way where things don't taper as they move further away from you, which means that things are perfectly parallel. So if I am doing this sort of figure, it's aimed to keep it in sort of can't see that super well, but you will be able to see it more clearly in a moment. I think I might actually be done with this. Emptied the bottle. Okay. So let's outline this guy. I might just do it that way. I think I like it better a little bit thinner. Gonna finish this one, then I'll flip the tape. Some audio going again. I'm gonna turn this down. Yeah, it's a little bit better. 225 minutes. Where to draw this line? is number 7. Negative forage. Is 12. Sign for a moment. Do a few of these. Looser. Because at this stage, the idea is that there's something of a barrier between the viewer and the animation that's obscuring the view, which in this case it's functioning as the paper itself. And so if you make it a bit distorted, it emphasizes that disconnect, that barrier. It's also just fun and easier to be looser. 16, 14, 15, 16. Let's do 2 more. Seventeen. No, I need this back. Nineteen. 18. 20. Switch out the tape for just a moment. $22. What am I seeing? Okay. Not there anymore. I guess I was casting a shadow or something. I can do it freehand. But I will need this in a moment. Okay. It's crazy how quickly I lose track of things when just take a small break in the process. Fudge. Okay. Was not thinking. Nope, this is 26. That'll be no mistake for this. At least 32, so I can do even distribution. Otherwise, it's 311. Yeah. Thinking about when I put all these frames out onto a grid. It ends up being 32 divides evenly. 8 and 4. Where 31 I'm pretty sure is a prime number. I can always like knock off a frame or two. It's the sort of thing where sometimes in the past I'll continue to do make concessions with, I'm like, they should really have one more frame, but I'm like, but if I have it this many frames, then it fits nicer into a grid where 30 divides nicely into 5 by 6, 6 by 5, however you want to say it. But 31 doesn't. But I really should add like that one additional little bit of stuff. Here's a little look-see. So the idea is that it's sort of passing into this sort of force field or item. I'm going to treat it kind of like water. I'm actually probably going to... I don't know. It would be nice to have like a little bit of a ripple-ish thing coming off. But on the back of the paper it's more warbly, so it's water, something like that. And then eventually it starts to clarify and the water level or whatever comes down from the top to the bottom as opposed to from the back to the front. I would like to add some rippled sort of stuff. Which I can do over a few frames here. Okay. So let's do some ripply bit. So that won't have anything immediately. Sake of it. painting time. This one might be in the best issue. Zoom out. You can download, or wait, I don't have these available for download, but if you want to listen to them on YouTube, you can. This one is Cowbell Kurt. I think it's like the third one that's uploaded. But just, I think this one is just a synth app on my phone and a drum machine. More recent ones I've been using a Korg. Yeah. More complex or more robust Korg app that you can do a bit more. The free app that I use for this little synth guy, it's called Synth One, and you can do a lot with it for creating sounds and types of sounds and different effects on it, but it doesn't have a lot for creating a sequence. If you're using it just as an instrument that's not doing the playback functionality as much, it's perfectly fine for that. But it only has up to 16 things you can throw in a sequence. But you also, it's 16 notes, but that also means that if you want to break between notes, that you only have that number of input-output sort of deals. Just a little bit more. And then I'm going to paint the backs. I made this track that's playing right now. For all my stuff, I made all the tracks, and it's on, you see the cassette player in the upper left. That's the thing that's actually playing the music. I guess I'm not like trained in any way as being a musician. I've made like just little things here and there. Nothing too robust. For these tracks, I was trying to figure out a way to have music, but be able to have the recordings uploaded to YouTube in different places without being taken down. And so I looked at different ways to make like simple musical sequences that are good for background sort of music, and I saw someone on TikTok that was messing with using cassette tapes, but like the playback was super slow, so I wanted to go in and mess with doing that to some degree. But since I've been working from home with pandemic stuff happening, I don't have all of my equipment with me, and I don't have my soldering iron or a space. I could bring it home, but I prefer to not solder in my bedroom just because there's different chemicals and it feels riskier in a different way. I don't know. I could, but I just haven't ever gotten there. Anyway, so I didn't go about making like the dude called it a drone track, but he has like a more expensive tape deck playback sort of deal that can go much slower. On the playback, you can from what I saw looking on YouTube, pretty easily hack into and like do circuit bending sort of stuff with cassette players to slow it down. I did look a little bit to see if there were cassette players that had that functionality built in, but most of the ones that do are ones that are a bit more expensive on eBay. Like, I ended up buying 2 cassette decks. One is the one that you can see there playing, and it's decent. It functions. The main thing that seems to be an issue with cassette players is belts that have worn out that rotate, advance, and spin things, and I think that one in this cassette deck might be a little bit odd, just for when I do fast forwarding on it. Sometimes it gets a little bit wonky, but that's mainly with tapes that are larger, like 2-hour tapes or 90-minute tapes, because once it hits a certain point, there's more tape that's spooled up on the one side, and so it takes more power to rotate it, and so sometimes it gets a little warbly with that. But then I bought a second tape deck that has levels on it. It has like little physical dials, so I can see how loud or quiet I record things and get it a little bit more consistent. It also has adjustable recording volume, so I can up the input and make for a cleaner sound by pulling it down to not redline internally, but have a higher input sound, so that there's a little less hiss sort of sound on the recording. But the tapes that I've been playing today don't have any of those higher higher volume recordings. But I wanted to mess with that, and I got a tape player, and then just trying to think about like recording music. For a while I've wanted to record just various covers, but not really learn the songs. Just cover it based on like my interpretation of it, and I know that it would be easier to cover it if I knew more about how the music is structured. But I know that once I learn that, I'll never be able to make quite as much of a DIY sort of deal again. I'm stuck with having that knowledge, which is a weird way to think about it. But it makes me think of I don't know if it's actually a Picasso quote, but it's said to be a Picasso quote where like he spent his lifetime learning to paint like a master or something. Or no, he spent 20 years learning how to paint like a master, and the rest of his life trying to learn how to paint like a kid. Something like that, where there's a freedom and a lack of influence that comes with not being formally trained in something, and you'll make connections or attempts or things that someone who's trained would never go about. And like, not knowing the rules means you don't know if you're following them or breaking them, and there's a freedom in that. And I do know a little bit of music. I learned like some basic major chords on piano so that I could have happier sounding stuff when I was making these sort of simple tapes. And I know basic rhythm of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 of 4/4 rhythm being really accessible and easier to follow. But outside of that, I don't know much regarding music theory. I never learned how to play any instrument. Played rock band and stuff, so had some amount of like rhythm built into things, but it's a much different thing to play music on your own. Playing with some different electronic instrument things, I've learned how much effects, pedals and stuff like that, of how much production goes into, like how much production affects the sound of music, where it's like for a while, anytime I heard an arpeggiator, which is just you hold down a key and it goes da 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 da, like up in a scale, and you can change the pace on that. In my mind, I thought someone was playing all of those notes every time, but not the truth. Or delay pedals, stuff like that, where Welcome to the Jungle or something. In my mind, I thought it was but it's and it's just like a simple scale, but it's put through electronics that then create a different sort of sound to it. And so, as I've gotten like mildly acquainted with different aspects of music production, oh, you're a band nerd. Yeah, I thought about trying to learn French horn or violin. I had a tiny violin when I was little, but I guess I would have been orchestra. I took art classes and typing. In middle school, it was like you either took band, chorus, orchestra, or you cycled through like typing class and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'll cycle through those. Part of it was I didn't want to have to carry an instrument, and instruments are expensive. And then in college, or not college, in high school, also just sort of focused on art things, but I've also didn't really participate in any extracurricular activities other than like dipping my toe in. I like joined science, or didn't actually join. I went to like the first thing of Science Olympiad, and none of the people in there were my friends, so it didn't stick. I would go to like art club, but I just would go for a little bit and then leave. And I wasn't fully in the art program. I was just sort of adjacent to it. Always been sort of one to have one toe in a bunch of different things. Something I didn't know about cassette tapes until recently is, in my mind, I thought it plays one direction and then it plays the opposite direction, and I thought somehow like both sides of the tape had information on them, like flipping, like a record or something, because the action of like flipping a tape, you think flip, and you have that set in your mind of like one side, A side, B side, but what's actually happening is the tape, pretty thin tape in a cassette player, or in a cassette. And so you got one spool here, one spool here, and then tape is wrapped around, comes down here, picks up, and there's a little thing that sort of is like a slight arch, and the tape runs along it, and it picks up a signal that's stored magnetically on the tape. The tape is just like bits of iron adhered to plastic, but the tape itself as it's running against the player head sort of thing, this sort of, it's got like a little arch to it. It's only reading half the tape. So the actual like thing that's picking stuff up is like about here. And so the tape plays through. All of this goes across this way, gets picked up, and then you flip it and it plays backwards, but now this piece of tape has been turned around 180 degrees. And so now it plays the opposite side of it. So it's sort of like half the information. Side A of the tape would be like on this side, and side B, and it would be going in this direction, and then this direction. And so when you flip the tape, it just is picking up the opposite side of the magnetic tape. Stuff that I didn't know, because I had never really thought about it. I don't know if I ever bought a like cassette album or something, other than like in high school as a curiosity, and because my sister got my dad's old car and it just had a cassette player in it, didn't have a CD player or auxiliary input, and so we bought some different tapes, and that's how I first got into James Brown. Was listening to those tapes. I like knowing how different tech stuff works. Got into VHS stuff for a minute, and that's interesting. Little bits there. That has a lot of... It's a lot happening in the machine itself, as opposed to like a record player or something. There's not nearly as much happening in a record player as there is on in a VCR. There's still a lot happening in a record player, because most technology is just different ways of storing information at different frequencies. So audio information isn't as dense as visual information as far as storage is concerned. So, or you might like, I forget, creative technology or something. There's some dude on YouTube who I follow and learned a variety of things from him about... I got to his page because I was looking at different like interstitial tech stuff, things that were like a step between what became the norm or the next thing. So like there was a period of time where there were digital cameras that had floppy disks that would store information on them before memory cards were more standardized or available or as cheap, and the interface wasn't the same. So when digital cameras were first gaining prominence, like every camera had a different, or most cameras had like different interfaces for communicating with your computer, so you had to use their software and like installed drivers, and most things were connected through weird connection ports that may or may not be USB. But most computers had a floppy drive. You could throw a floppy disk in there and there was no additional steps of installing driver software, stuff like that. So there were cameras that you would just stick a floppy disk into, and it would only store like, I don't know, maybe a dozen photos. But the fact that you didn't have to go get them developed and scan things, because that's what would have been the way to digitize things, or have whatever place that you were getting your photos developed, have them process and digitize them and put them on a CD for you. even that wasn't as standard at that time. It was cheaper, easier. You didn't have to like go anywhere and wait or like pay extra to have it done within an hour. So yeah, like floppy disks straight up in the camera. But talking about the fidelity of audio versus video, RCA at one point in time they wanted to, because they produced a lot of records, they wanted to have something that essentially was a record that would play video. But the frequency of signal that is required to store all that information is much higher than the frequency for audio. So like audio, it's usually like 48 kilohertz or something, which means 48,000 times per second. Maybe I'm wrong on that. That sounds crazy. I might be wrong. Like, there aren't super high frequencies that are in audio, but to convey enough information to be reproduced on CRT TV, an old tube TV. This is me going around a bunch of different ways for how I've contextualized and understood things. You can't do a record. You have to have a completely different means of storing information to get that sort of fidelity. High fidelity, high frequency. I was talking with someone and they were asking about talking about lo-fi hip-hop beats, and I was like, that stands for low fidelity, like it's recorded at a lower frequency, or like it's not as high quality of sound. And they were like, I only ever knew it as like lo-fi, as like a genre, and that was something that surprised me because I'd always... Anyway, jumping back again, how much information is required to have an image on a tube TV? Most tube TVs are like 480 lines. I would have to draw this probably. Let me fill this one in and then I'll draw a little loose thing to try and communicate how a tube TV would work. Okay, that guy's filled in. Let's grab a piece of paper and talk about tube TVs for a sec. So, tube TV is done. How it works is there's an electron gun back here that's firing out one single point. And that point goes across here at different brightnesses. Goes across one time, then jumps back over here 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and having various brightnesses, it creates an image through all of these little sort of moments going across to create an image. It goes across and back and forth. It creates 480 lines to create a single image. Sometimes it's like half of that, and it sort of goes in between. But for a 480 line image, that's 480 times that it goes across to create one picture. Most tube TVs are playing back at 30 hertz, which means that's 30 times per second, which means that this is going across and repeating to create 480 lines. That's 24, keep it 2, 3 times 4 is 12. Every second when you're watching a tube TV, unless my math is wrong. No, I want to check. Okay. What is this? 480 times 30. Okay, yeah. I got it right. 14,400 times every second. This is going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's not, you can't store that amount of information physically just pushed into the grooves of a record. So RCA wasn't able to just give a disc through their own production thing and do that. They had to create a new system that had a much higher fidelity, and that's where you start having like laser etched things and stuff that are closer to a CD. Or laser disc. I don't know if you're at all familiar with frame rates for television view and stuff like that, but a lot of, or if not most, broadcast television is done at a weird frame rate. It's done at I got into animation from just being curious about it. Seeing flipbooks, stuff like that. I like that it does break down information and creates things, and it's like all very playful and techy and sort of magical in that way. I like I really like process and how things work, stuff like that, and exploring those bits. Someone who, like, I remember one time getting lunch with my friend and they had like leaf lard or something like that on the menu. Like it said, it has leaf lard, and I was like, I have no idea what that means. And so I looked it up, and it has to do with like how it looks like the veins on some sort of pig fat thing ends up like it's a more fine sort of fatty something or other that resembles a leaf. But like my friend was like, I don't know what that is, and that was good enough for him. Not for me. I immediately looked it up, and I was like, of course you are. Oh, back to the frame rate thing. What was I thinking? In the US, television frame rates are based on 30 hertz. And that comes about because the alternating current, what you get out of your wall outlet, is 60 hertz. The electricity is going 60 times every second. And so just split that in half, and you get 30 hertz for televisions. And when it was broadcast signals only in black and white, you had two signals running simultaneously that would be picked up. You had audio and visual, because it was just black. just black and white and audio. But when color TVs got introduced, those are 3 channels for the video. It's red, green, blue. And those lights combine to create all colors that you see on your TV. But when you had 4 signals, there was like wonky stuff happening with the audio and the video. And so the solution was to, instead of it being 30 frames per second, it became 29.97 frames per second. And then it meant that like the signals wouldn't get messed up by one another. I don't know exactly the science behind that, but I did look up why, because if you do any video editing, stuff like that, a lot of the defaults are 29.97 frames per second. And I'm like, that seems pretty arbitrary. But it comes about because of now antiquated stuff, because there's no over-the-air broadcast signal in the United States since 2009. I believe it was 2009. There was a point in time where Google was trying to buy out the rights to those frequencies. The FCC restricts what frequencies you can broadcast at. But there were different companies that wanted to buy the rights to that to do various projects, but one of the ideas was a free cell phone service that was ad-based. I don't think it ever came to fruition, but something I was curious about at the time. At the time, I had no sort of like personal money, and so I was like, I would love to have a free cell phone plan, but now I'm like, I don't really want Google to control me talking on the phone with friends and loved ones. I think the dude's name on YouTube that I'll watch is Technology Connections. He's good. He does in-depth stuff and explains things. I forget if he was one. There was a time where I was just looking at old cameras, old digital cameras and different things, and there was one that popped up that was a like Fisher Price camcorder that recorded to cassette tape, but it output a video signal. But it was a terrible camera for a bunch of different reasons. It could only record like up to 10 minutes because VHS tape is about like half an inch maybe, or 3/4 inches, and cassette tape is like less than 1/4 inch, so it's much thinner, so it can't carry as much information. So in order to accommodate that, the camera had to it could only take like 10 minutes of recorded time or something at a pretty low fidelity. But it also meant that the speed that the tape had to be accelerated at was pretty significant, which meant that the motor was pretty loud inside of it, and like any audio that you recorded onto the tape was like overwhelmed by just the sound of the motor advancing. It's like a plastic camera. It's not meant to be high end, so it's not the smoothest motor. It also like could only record for like 5 minutes or something with like 6 AA batteries. So it takes a lot. Also, the lens on it was not a lens so much as it's a pinhole. Hey, sexy sustainability. How you doing? I've been talking about outdated tech. What are the advantages of a cork yoga mat? Is it that it's sustainable? More so because it's a natural material? Is it softer? Does it absorb more moisture for hot yoga? I've been talking about antiquated tech because Eric was complimenting the music, and I was like, I made the music. It's playing off of that tape player. And then I just decided to keep on talking about odds and ends of things and like how cassettes work. And interstitial tech that didn't catch on in the same way as like more universal things. Take in more carbon. Herbivore. Like urban. Thanks. I forget what this track is, and I can't hear the music because I don't have earbuds. History. You should check out the. Let me find them. Yep, who's this dude? Does this take me here? Yeah, it does. Okay. You can check out this guy. He talks about a bunch of different odds and ends of tech, some contemporary, some older. I learned about light switches from him. I don't hear the track because I have a mic. That's just loosely picking stuff up, and I don't like having headphones in when I'm working. At least not for this sort of thing. So it's just playing. Because otherwise I'd get feedback, because the mic would pick up the music. And depending on the delay, it would probably be more like an echo rather than feedback, because there's more of a time delay between input output. No, it would just be an echo, wouldn't be feedback because I'm not hearing my output. No. What was it? If you want to listen to cassettes on your own time, you can watch them on YouTube. This one is still Cowbell Curtis. Cowbell Kurt, I forget what I named it differently on either side of the cassette. forget if on this tape, on some of them I went back and like tried to even out the levels because they vary a bit, because I was just using the cassette deck that is playing back now, and that one I would just judge by ear whether or not it was loud enough or too quiet, and you can't really adjust the volume on the headphones. And so sometimes I'd record it super loud and sometimes quiet. It's inconsistent on some of the playback, so depending on what cassette you listen to on YouTube, it might be mixed completely differently. I don't know crazy amount about audio. There's a lot that goes into audio production that I just don't know. Okay. Thanks for subscribing. I said Eric, but seems like your name. I thought your name was Eric Orenia. What is it? Erico? Sorry if I've been saying your name wrong. My apologies. Is it Erico or Erico? I just got an email notification. I don't get. Okay, Erico. Wasn't sure. I got an email notification that you had subscribed to YouTube, and it popped up on my phone, and I was like, oh, I've been saying it wrong. On YouTube, you can watch a bunch of old streams. There's a lot there. I lose track. I forget how many just hours that I have on YouTube. So I've been... Well, now I'm switching over to not streaming on weekends because it's nice to take a break. Yeah. And not get burnt out. Sort of a different risk at times though, because I also know that like as soon as I give myself a little bit of leeway, I have a habit of sort of being like, okay, that's the end of that. So just gotta be wary and get into the habit of taking small breaks. Structure work days as they go. Freelance. Pandemic stuff, I've been working from home. As opposed to have a studio space, but I'm not sure. I have a lease on it that ends in July. I'm not very likely to renew that. But it's like work on emailing and such in the morning. Might work on something or resolve bits that need resolving. And then stream mid-afternoon. After I stream, edit the footage. Which one's this? This is very... Edit footage. Create files that work for selling some items. Upload all of those. Upload the recording of the live stream to YouTube. Oh, I guess that's the last two. Okay. And then if I have professional work that I need to get done, I can work on that in the evenings. It's sort of like just how it goes. This one. It depends on what work I have, what works come in, stuff like that. I haven't had a super heavy workflow since I started streaming. And so I haven't had to really like skip streaming days, but most of the time when I've ended up skipping streaming, it's because I have like a doctor's appointment or something. Oh, he's got a little sticky. This is 13. Did you have a more specific thing that you were curious about regarding how I structure work days? If you actually were more curious about like plans or stuff like that for streaming, because I do not usually plan out streams. It's usually just sort of start, think about what I've been thinking about, sketch some things, and then figure something out. Sometimes I have plans, but typically it's like a loose idea that might be ruminating, and then resolve bits of that here and there. Okay, let's get to scanning. Need to plug this in. Look, image capture and readjust this. Personal management, I don't know, varies from person to person. Some people need to have more structure, some people don't. I will say just generally as a work ethic sort of thing, I do my best to start things as soon as possible. Blockhead, scans. Because things almost always take longer than I expect they will. And if I start earlier, then I can figure out how long something will take. As opposed to just making an assumption. Oop, not using custom size, then like that. More freelance, it would just be recognizing time that you have, and whether or not you're willing or want to dedicate that time to non-personal things. Something that I realized when I was younger is when people say they don't have free time, they mean they don't commit the time to things. Like I'm not someone who's like hustle constantly, always be working. You should take breaks and take time for yourself because burnout is not fun. But most people have a lot more free time than they realize. It's just a lot of interstitial time, which I like having. Everyone likes having, but if it's more of like in school when people were like, I don't know how I can get this done. I don't have any time. And I was like, I was with you for a while and we weren't doing anything. Which is okay, but just being honest with yourself. I remember one specific time where like there were some people that I didn't really hang out with that much, and they asked if I wanted to like go and work with them at the computer lab in college. And I went and I was like, I guess I could work on some stuff. I got some things that are due in a bit that I should probably start working on. And we were there for like 2 hours and I finished the thing I was working on, and like they just were watching movies and hanging out, which I understand that, but it's just a weird thing where it's not how I ever learned to socialize, was like working with other people. It's a lot more solo sort of work for me. Or if I am working with people, I'm like, okay, here's the plan, here's how it's being executed. Part of that is feeling guilty about wasting other people's time, and just feeling anxious when there are things to be done and they don't get work done. When I'm interacting with other people especially. And I can feel like I'm wasting other people's time. And you're like, man. So here you can actually see a tape. I opened that aggressively, accidentally. Not everyone's like that. I have friends who are far from being that. And friends who are very much that sort of person. Not just you're someone who, like, I don't assume you are, but I know people who complain about not having time, and I'm like, you really do have time. And it's not even like people who watch TV all the time. It's like people who are more likely to like get overwhelmed by things and then sort of stall out. Something that's helpful for me is approaching tasks in smaller pieces, or giving myself individual little goals, things to achieve, because then I can feel comfortable or confident in achieving those small bits along the way. Like tail end of last year, I started a project where I was animating all the letters of the alphabet, which is something that there's no physical way that I could have done it in a day, because each one took me like 3 to 4 hours. Can't do that. Can't make them all in a day, but breaking it up into those small achievable goals of each day is a letter, I get the satisfaction of completing the task. I get to see it and share that thing, and then I slowly build it up over time. Many small pieces instead of one big one, or like 3 big things, or like 30 different tasks that you have to accomplish that you imagine them as being one big task, and that big task gets overwhelming, but really it's just little bits. So those are general things for my workflow. It's not for everyone. Different people work differently. That's just how I sort of structure things. I'm also someone who it's much easier for me to continue working than to start working. And knowing that about myself, like, it's so much easier for me to work till 5 a.m. than it is for me to wake up at 8 a.m. or earlier than that. Glad you like that series. I don't know if you use them as if you're on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, or I think they might. I don't know if they're on Tinder, but and you want to use them as stickers, you can search alphabet loops, and then the letter that you want. Not all as one. Alphabet loops is one word. But then you put a space and put the letter you like or want to use, and it should pop up as a sticker you can use in Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok. Another breakdown sort of thing that I do for working on these bits is I do outlines, all the outlines. It's part efficiency and part a sense of a reward that I've completed the task. And finding breakpoints where I feel comfortable taking a break and coming back. So in the case of these, I can do all the outlines on one side, the back side, do that sort of deal. But I've got these markers along the way that sort of showcase achievements for myself. Also with that alphabet series, I didn't have to think about what I was going to do each day, which was something of a relief. Just a pre-planned thing of like, do a letter, do the next one, do the next one. And so I sat down like, what's today? Today's C. Today's X. And that was nice. I haven't done a series in that since then, but did some origami guys. That was something of a series, but those take longer than I think they will, and I'm not something that really I would need to do more planning on the back end or the front end before I start into it, and that's a lot of work. And once I finish doing these live streams, I don't necessarily want to work on them in the immediate aftermath, other than just processing some footage. Just a couple more. I think I might have to realign some of these. It's when I was drawing them some more little off. Those were in the wrong order. And that's the last one. Prep these files. Rename. Paste that in. Keep going. Photoshop. File. Scripts. More files in the stack. Browse. Desktop. Live Designs. 301. What happened here? Did a weird deal. Okay, desktop. Live Designs. 301. Okay. Now let's see. That means in here. Today is 3/01/2021. Oh, I get to do a new big folder. Set this aside. Okay. It's going to take a moment. I didn't do the best job. Okay, using one way, that's not significant. Alright, this guy. And new frame. Just trying to get a sense of where things crop out. Right about there. And get rid of this guy. Let's get a little bit of some contrast going. This going here. Go a little bit darker on that bit. And change this to 0.06. This 750 instead. And see what sort of size animated GIF I get out of this. And this guy. See where that puts it. Nice. Okay. A little bit smaller. And this is going in 301. Grab that naming convention. Just Save this out. Zoom this a little. Turn off Photoshop. Switch out what's coming here. Sound it up a little. Cool. I think I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with what it means to animate front and back. Where the last few times, wait, that's fine. No, that's fine. Okay, good. Anyway, so that's today's bit. Spiel time. If you want to watch, or if you want to buy these stills, other merchandise that I have available, you can go to traceloops.com/store. If you want to watch this stream in full at a later point in time, the cassette tapes that you've been listening to, old streams and stuff like that, you can go to youtube.com/traceloops and see a bunch of stuff there. If you want to follow me on other platforms, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I'm Traceloops on those spots. You can also, if you have questions, concerns, want to make a commission, or if you want to have something shipped outside of the US, you can email me, traceloops@traceloops.com. If you have just general questions or want a different format for reminders, stuff, and things and stuff, you can join my Discord server, which is there in the chat. And I'm not going to say what that link is because it's a bunch of numbers and characters and such. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Appreciate it. For new folks and old folks alike. And thanks for watching, Erico. And I think that you would enjoy the technology connections dude if you liked me going through my little bit of stuff. He's a little bit more thorough and sometimes a little bit drier, just because it's being more thorough. But he likes throwing in jokes. Seems like a friendly dude. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Plan on being back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, doing some sort of animation, or at least longer form, like around 3 hours. Today went a little bit longer than that because I decided to go ahead and paint the backs. So, adios.